Hello, my name is Maria Helena Carey, and I write a blog called The Hill is Home. And I am here with Julie. Julie, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Julie Aronson. I'm the Executive Director of CHAMPS, the Capitol Hill Chamber of Commerce. We advocate, connect, and promote our Capitol Hill small businesses.
Okay, great. And today we are joined by Jeanné Lewis. Please, Jeanné, introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Again, my name is Jeanné Lewis. I am an independent candidate for the DC City Council at large. And would you like me to share a little bit more about myself and where I come from?
Sure, if you could share, go ahead, please.
Yeah. So I'm originally from the DC area. I grew up in Prince George's County, but I went to high school in Washington, DC at Georgetown Visitation. My mom was a DC public school teacher and employee. She actually was principal of Stewart Hobson Middle School on Capitol Hill for a while in the 90s. And I am running for a DC council because I remember DC from growing up and the opportunities that were here in our city and that it is home. And I want us to get back to a city where everyone who calls DC home can thrive. And right now that's not what we have. So I went away to college, lived in multiple states over 12 years, and worked mostly in nonprofit organizations doing social justice work. So I've seen a lot of examples and built a lot of relationships with folks who know how to make that happen in cities. And I want to bring those relationships and those best practices to DC.
Wonderful, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead and get started with my first question. In such a crowded field of candidates, where there are 25 candidates in the field, how do you plan on standing out? And what are your thoughts on such a crowded field? And do you think that there are any inherent advantages for some candidates over others?
So one way that I'm different from many of the other candidates is that experience I mentioned, living in 4 other states, all over the country, working with national organizations. I work now for a national nonprofit. And so our campaign is offering comprehensive intersectional solutions to the challenges that have plagued our city across administrations. So I can take those relationships and that work, all the great ideas we've seen both in the city and in other parts of the country, and make sure that we invest in them properly so we can bring them to Washington, DC. Another way that I'm different is the platform that we have is not only from me. We had visioning conversations in all 8 wards of the city, specifically asking residents about our home. What is their vision for our home? At that time, we had a surplus. Now we're in a different position. But that question around vision still stands. And so my background of bringing people together across divides to really do a lot of problem solving allows me the leadership experience to help people think creatively, not only about how do we address our most urgent problems, but also bring forward a collective long-term vision for the city. Regarding the field, I think in some ways it's a blessing that the field is crowded. I'm a public financing candidate, and this is the first year the city has public financing, and that's one reason why the field is so crowded. And so that's a beautiful reflection of our democracy working and our public financing program working. I think that there are other candidates who have better name recognition or who might have worked in local government before, but I think that what I'm hearing as I talk to voters and talk to folks around the city, people are really ready for creative and innovative solutions, and they don't want business as usual. And they want to be included in thinking very boldly about our vision for our home, for our city. And again, I have the leadership experience to do that.
Wonderful. So each ward council office handles constituent services inside their geographic area, but the at-large seat does not. How do you see that office as more than just a backup for citizens who are having a hard time getting a hold of their ward council member? And how would you raise the profile of that office, and specifically of your office, to help all Washingtonians?
I think one very straightforward solution, which I would love to do as a council member, is to place a staff person with the constituent offices of each ward representative. So even if that staff person isn't there full time, to make representatives of the at-large seats available at the places where folks are used to going to raise constituent concerns, I think makes a lot of sense and allows us to partner with the ward representatives more effectively to address problems in real time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go ahead now and turn it over to Julie, and she will ask you 3 questions.
Great. Jeanné, thank you for joining us today. A common concern raised by CHAMPS members is that it's hard to do business in DC. The licensing is hard, bureaucracy is slow, and the agency databases don't always talk to each other. Many small business owners spend hours navigating the DC bureaucracy, and some have told me that they would never have been able to start a small business if it wasn't for having a partner with a full-time job. This hurts the prospective small business owner who may not be well resourced. So how would you use your position on the council to make small business ownership easier and more accessible?
I think that's a really great question because we have Native Washingtonians, young people, students in high school who want to start businesses, as well as folks who are newer to the city, but who have an entrepreneurial spirit and everything in between. And so I think one opportunity, especially for folks who don't have very much business experience, is more apprenticeship programs. We have internship programs, we have summer job programs for younger people, but DC doesn't have very many apprenticeship programs where a person can walk with an established business owner or an established contractor, you know, for a significant amount of time to build their relationships and understand the process start to finish, A to Z. So I think that would be huge for younger folks, especially who are still in school, who might be interested in starting a business. For other folks who have been out of school or who might want to transition career paths, I think that you mentioned something around our infrastructure and the databases not talking to each other well. Again, I think that's a problem that can be solved by looking at other cities that have figured out this problem and who communicate very well. And so having the National League of Cities right here in Washington, D.C., who has access to the mayors and the local governments of cities all across the country, I would look to find those best practices and figure out how we might borrow or perhaps learn from what other cities are doing to make those administrative processes more efficient.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
While businesses are reopening, as we're in the pandemic and we're reopening in phase 2, sales for many of our storefront businesses and our restaurants have dropped significantly from last year, from this time last year, 40, 50, 60% and more. The fixed costs of taxes and rent are still due, and a lot of businesses have already exhausted their paycheck protection funds and their DC microloan funds. If you were on the council right now, what are some of the proposals that you would put forward to help our small businesses continue to operate and employ people?
Yeah. At the end of the day, small businesses need capital. And even in times that aren't a crisis moment, like what we have now, small businesses often will rise or fall because of easy access to capital. And when the COVID-19 crisis hit, I actually put forward an idea, and I mentioned it in a previous candidate debate and in some emails from my campaign, about a mini bonds program. So, you know, cities can request municipal bonds, and usually they are large investors who are outside of the city. But some cities will sell municipal bonds to its residents in denominations of $25, $100, up to $500 or $1,000. And these mini bond programs usually have distinct purposes. And one purpose that I propose is that we create and generate additional capital for our small businesses to help move through this crisis, and also to help secure the city's income stream until we get back to normal. So this idea is a unique idea. Many people, I haven't heard anyone else in DC talking about it, but those are some of the kinds of creative ideas that I would bring to the council. It's a way for DC residents to own the debt of the city. It's an opportunity for us to get more connected to our small businesses and be better informed about the businesses in our community so that we can support them. The mini bonds program comes with a level of PR and promotion. And so in some ways our small businesses would be getting free advertising. But all in all, this kind of initiative would generate capital in the short term that could directly go to our businesses, and then also help the city budget come out of a crisis moment in the long term.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My last question is about residential and commercial parking on Capitol Hill and really in many DC neighborhoods. It's a flashpoint. How to balance the parking among residents, customers, employers, and employees has been a long-standing question. So where parking is in high demand, employees and some DC service providers just have to absorb parking tickets as a cost of doing business. How would you approach this problem? What are some of your ideas around it?
Parking is definitely a flashpoint and a huge problem in the city. And I live in Ward 7, particularly for folks that live in economically depressed communities. Oftentimes we have to drive in order to patronize businesses or to access other services like healthcare services, or even just to go to the grocery store. So I definitely am a friend of the environment. I would love to reduce our carbon emissions, but until we have equitable development throughout the city and every neighborhood is walkable, that's not necessarily feasible. So I do think that we need to lessen some of the restrictions that exist in parking. I've seen, for example, I go to church in Ward 1 and I live in Ward 7. I've seen parking become increasingly restrictive even on Sundays when I go to church. And so I'd like to reverse that because otherwise we're actually excluding many DC residents who need to patronize businesses in other parts of the city, and we're lessening income for some of our businesses. I think that the city has generated quite a bit of income from parking tickets and from fines. And so I think that we can afford to make the fines more lenient and increase the parking allowances in various parts of the city. The fines between parking and traffic cameras actually have become a huge burden, and I think are an overreach of the city on everyday residents of Washington, D.C. And so I'd like to see those restrictions come down a little bit as well. But long term, I think that the more we empower small businesses to be successful in every ward and in every part of the city, again, neighborhoods will become more walkable and more folks will have access to what they need in their own neighborhood. And that should lessen the strain on parking. And so we really should be looking towards that long-term goal.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, so finally, we come to the last question. What would you name the Washington football team? And do you support a return to RFK?
You know, it's funny. I actually think this is probably the most controversial question of all the things that you've asked me today on the interview. And so I will say that, you know, growing up, my dad was actually a Dallas fan. So, you know, don't tell anybody. I know. And so I think it's really important. We have an opportunity to have the community give buy-in. So I am not going to offer a suggestion for the name for the Washington football team,
Okay.
but I do perfect example and a perfect opportunity for us to crowdsource it and to pull folks together. Our city is very diverse right now. And so pulling folks together from all different parts of the city and coming up together with a name that excites us. In terms of returning to RFK, I actually don't support the team returning to RFK because I think that property has a lot to offer, not only for the residents of Ward 6 and the residents of Ward 7 who live on that side of the river, but also other folks in the city. And I have nostalgic memories of attending events at RFK. Other people have memories of attending concerts and festivals. Other people across the city have told me that they're looking for recreation opportunities. And that seems to be the trend that I hear across race, gender, class, and age. And so I would like to see that space used as a recreational hub for residents to engage with one another and to engage in a variety of recreational activities.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and for letting us get to know you better. How can people get a hold of you if they want to know more about your campaign or support you?
Great. Again, my name is Jeanné Lewis. You can see my name behind me there. And my website is JeannéLewisAtLarge.com. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Ms. Jeanné Lewis. That's MS Jeanné Lewis. And on Facebook at Jeanné at Large. And again, I'm a public financing candidate, so I would love your donation to my campaign because the city will match it 5 to 1. But I also would love to hear your comments. And so you can leave me a comment or a question on my website, and I promise that one of us will get back to you.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again so much.
Thank you.
And best of luck.
Thank you.